Hey friends, it's Laura with Laura's Handmade Haven. Welcome or welcome back. I'm so glad you joined me today. Oh my goodness. So I recorded this video and then realized that my audio was not working. So this is the finished project. We are going to be putting our outer borders on our Selvage string block quilt today. So I'm just going to give this little short intro and just tell you that we're going to be working together and we'll get it done. And so it's going to be a voiceover. So you may notice I'm going to try to cut out when I'm looking at the camera and talking, but if not, you'll just know the audio is not going to match the video. Don't think you're crazy. Don't think that something is wrong with your video on your machine. It's just that I had no audio for my original recording. So yeah, it's going to be fun. So what I'm going to do is I have pinned my borders onto my quilt top, and I'm just going to take this quilt top over to the machine and sew my side borders on. I know that it was top and bottom on the design wall, but that's just because I put the quilt top on the design wall crooked. Okay, so for those of you who have not watched my videos before, I am using a Juki DX7. I love my Juki so much. I do use the Schmetz Microtex or universal size needles in my Juki. And then I use a Metler silk finish cotton thread in the top and bobbin for sewing. So I'm just going to get started here and sew on my side borders. And again, I did pin them just on each end and then in the middle. What I did was I took that 4.5 inch square and I folded it in half to line it up with the middle of each side, and I pinned it into place. So now when I'm at the machine, I can just simply use my 1/4 inch piecing foot, run my fabric along the edge of that piecing foot, and sew on my borders. Now, when I come to this string block here in the center of the border, I am going to make sure that I keep my seams flat, and they're going to be pressed out towards the white tone-on-tone fabric. That's just going to give it a little better ability to lay flat on those outside borders, because obviously with that layer of Pellon, it does add a little bulk in the center of this outside border. Now I'm just going to sew on the other outside side border, and we will be able to put this back on the design wall and look at our top and bottom borders for the quilt and figure out what we need to complete this outer border. Okay, so on the design wall, you're going to see that I have my 2 of my side borders on there and 2 of them are not. So now I'm just going to grab my other pieces off the design wall, one side at a time, and construct those outside borders for those. So one trick for you, you can take your pieces off the design wall, keep them in the correct order, take them over to your sewing machine, and just make sure that you're sewing them in the correct order. And I'm going to leave my quilt top center up on my design wall for a visual reference, because my sewing machine is in a spot where I can look up and make sure that these angles are going the correct way. All right, so at the sewing machine, now I'm going to basically just sew these on one at a time onto these white strips. And again, I can use the quilt top center that's hanging on my design wall as a visual reference just to double check myself. That way I will have less seam ripping to do, because let's be honest, I am anglely challenged, and yeah, it's very easy for me to get messed up when I am doing something like this. I just want to make sure that they are going the right way. So I'm going to double check before I sew on each segment onto this outside border. Once I have all of my border pieces completed and together, I will take that back to the design wall, hang it up, pin it in place, and I'm actually going to go ahead and pin that to my quilt top center. That way I know it's on the correct side and it is ready for me to go when I get to the point where I'm sewing them on. I'm going to grab the other 3 blocks off of the other side of the quilt top and bring them over to the sewing machine to sew on next. Now you may be wondering how I figured out the outside border measurements, and basically, I had 2 string blocks left over, and they weren't quite 10 inches. So I went ahead and cut those down to 4.5-inch squares. So I got 4.5-inch squares out of each one of those 2 leftover string blocks. Well, that determined my outside border width. And then for the length, I'm going to have, basically 2 segments and then that center block on each side of my quilt. So I just took the quilt measurement and determined that those white sections would need to be 18.25 inches long, and then the string blocks would fit nicely in the center just to make the side borders of my quilt top to the appropriate length. Now to find the center, I'm just going to take that 4.5-inch square, fold it in half with its seams, and then I'm going to match it up to that seam on my quilt top center like you're seeing right here. And then I will pin it into place. And that way, when I go to sew this border on, I have the pinning done for me. And I know that I will be able to ease this border in along the side and not have to worry about if I have my blocks aligned correctly or not. All right, so let's do the other outside border, the only one remaining. And then we will take it over and pin it on as well. And we'll be ready to put our outside borders onto our quilt top. Now, since I pinned those on the design wall, I don't have to worry about pinning them again. They're already ready for me. So I'll just bring them over to the sewing machine and sew our outside borders on, and we will be done with our Selvage string block quilt. Now, with these last 2 outside borders, you will notice that I will do a back stitch at the beginning and end of this border. And I started doing that a while back just because I long arm my quilts. And I found that if I do that, it just gives myself a little security that seam is not going to come loose when I go to long arm it, when I get it on the machine and have a little bit of a tension against it. So I like to do a little back stitch at the beginning and end of each of my final outside borders just to make sure that those seams stay put. Now I will be nesting that block with the outside border coming the other direction. You can nest those seams and that way you know that's perfectly aligned. And then again, I have pinned it in the middle, making sure that my 4.5-inch square is perfectly centered with my quilt top. And so you'll see that I'll just make sure that I finger press those pellon seams to go the correct way. And then I'll remove my pen and I will be ready to go for the rest of the distance on this outside border. Just have one side left to do and then we will have our reveal. Just to wrap up what we've accomplished today, we've put that outer border on our Selvage string block quilt. Now remember, I used Selvage string blocks in the middle of my star. I also created my half square triangles with Selvage edges as well, using some pellon interfacing as kind of a foundation building piece to make sure that these were the way I wanted them. And remember, I purposefully made my half square triangles a little wonky, just a little wink to give a little more playfulness to this quilt. Now you may notice in these, in this inner and outer border, I do have some selvages showing there. And again, that was on purpose. It was by design. I just wanted to give another little wink using some selvages in this Selvage string block quilt top. So you'll recall that I had 6 Selvage string blocks to work with. 4 of those were used in the center, and then the other 2 were incorporated into that outer border, cutting those down to 4.5-inch square, and then measuring out my white border strips that I needed to get all of that wrapped up and get that outer border onto my quilt. So I really like the way this project turned out, and I love that I used up some more scraps and some more little things that were just kind of to the side and not really being used. Didn't really have a huge purpose, but this turned out so cute and I'm so excited to get it done. So this quilt top is about 47 inches square. Definitely a nice little like baby quilt or a little kid's quilt, just for like a throw or something for some cartoon watching on the couch. So this is going to be super fun, super cute once it's quilted and together. The backing, I'm probably just going to go with a plain white backing, and then I might go ahead and use the same white border for my binding on this quilt as well. So I hope this inspires you to just like look through your scraps and think about making some string blocks, putting them into a different type of traditional block, because anytime you see a blank square, you can totally use a string block in its place, and you can definitely use them as half square triangles and other pieces as well. So just look through your traditional block patterns and think, how can I incorporate a string block? It's going to be super fun, gives it a completely different look at the end of the day, and it will definitely use up some of those scraps for you as well. Until next time, I hope you find joy in all you do. Carve out some time for crafting and creating, and remember, it's always better when you make stuff up.